we have to start with the material. And that material sometimes is going to be messy and ugly and quote unquote sinful. But how do you sing the song of the cure when you haven't sung the song of the illness?
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Jamie Quatro is the author of Two-Step Devil, a Southern Gothic novel very much in the tradition of Flannery O'Connor. The book list review of Two-Step Devil describes it as brilliantly paced and exquisitely detailed. This striking novel takes on such weighty themes as faith, humanity, and frailty without a touch of melodrama. A spectacular masterpiece. Book page called Quatro, A Saint of Southern Discomfort. Jamie Quatro and I sat down at the Illuminate conference near Chattanooga and recorded the following conversation in front of a live audience. Jamie Quatro, so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast. We're at the Illuminate conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee, your adopted hometown.
Yes.
And so thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I'm really excited to talk about Two-Step Devil. Before we started recording, I was just saying in spite of the fact that you have some mixed feelings that maybe we can talk about being compared to Flannery O'Connor, it did feel a little bit like a visit with Flannery O'Connor.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. I assume you're saying that because of the prophet in the woods figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Flannery O'Connor, she really did love her backwoods prophets.
Yes.
And can I tell you a little bit about the genesis of how this book came about?
Yes.
It came about, for those of you who know the area, there is such a man that lives out the back of Lookout Mountain. My daughter was 15 years old, and I was teaching her to drive. And if you know Lookout Mountain, you know it's a bad place to teach a teenager to drive. It's windy and hilly in one lane, so we went out the back of the mountain, got lost, came upon a shack on the side of the road. And an old man, he had pumpkins laid out. I was like, well, as long as we're lost, let's buy our pumpkins. Old man came out and asked if I would like to come inside and see his prophecy paintings. And of course, my daughter was like, Mom, don't get out of the car. And I am a writer. So I got out of the car and my daughter stayed in the car. And that began a 15-year friendship with this man, Ralph. He's an incredible artist. Sometimes when I do these talks, I'll have some of his art behind me. And, at first when I got to know him, I thought it's very much like in the book. These paintings are apocalyptic. They're visions of, heavenly armies coming down. Some of them are indictments of the government or, visions of the prison system, alcohol, against abortion, all of these things you would expect. But as time went on and I started getting to know him, kind of really came to love this man for who he is. He's a gentle-spirited, kind man. And after about 3 or 4 years, I said, Ralph, how would you feel if I made you the basis of a character in a short story I'm thinking about? At the time, it was going to be a short story, and he was thrilled.
Really?
So then every time I came to visit him after that, he would make sure I had my pen and my paper and my camera running. And
really?
So, yeah, I've got, hundreds of hours of footage with him. But so it's actually when I met him, I thought this is Flannery O'Connor territory, not just topographically, but spiritually. It felt very much like he was one of the last of maybe like a dying type or dying breed that you don't find these. He's pretty much doesn't read, is illiterate, living off the grid. Yeah.
I'm not sure there were always a ton of those prophet artists running around, but yeah.
But in Flannery O'Connor's time, perhaps a little more than today. That now with the internet and things, they're just a little bit more integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was assuming Howard Finster figured in, but
yes,
it was more close. It was closer to home than Howard Finster.
Closer to home, and although I've been to his Paradise Gardens, and of course, when I started writing this book, I did a lot of research into the other self-taught and outsider artists, and it's a thing in the South, the outsider artist. It's really interesting to see what these people are doing and have been doing.
Yeah. So I was reading a review from the New York Times, and I appreciated and mostly agreed with something that they said, but I wanted to hear you talk about it. This reviewer, and I can't remember who it was, said, just as the prophet makes art out of detritus, and of course you've got your prophet making a Ezekiel machine. Ezekiel? Yeah, the wheels and the wheels out of the saw blades.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quatro alchemizes gloomy subject matter, sexual abuse, terminal disease, mental illness, poverty, suicide, and American decay into transcendent beauty. So I agree that we got some gloomy subject matter. I agree we've got some transcendent beauty. I'm trying to decide what to do with that verb, alchemize. I guess I'm saying the way you describe Ralph sounds like you weren't conjuring or alchemizing beauty. Sounds like you saw beauty. What do you think about that statement that you alchemized beauty out of?
Yeah.
Out of what? Gloomy.
Out of gloomy subject matter. That's such an interesting verb, isn't it? Alchemy. Because when you think of the medieval alchemists, they were seeking to transform like a base metal into gold. Whereas, and that's an object. But when you're looking at a human being, is there ever anything that's actually a transformation, or is it really just loving someone enough to see past the facade or the darkness or whatever it is, to see the true self that's in there? The imago Dei, as we would say, the image and likeness of God. So I don't know if I would say, I maybe alchemize. Maybe it's two sides of one coin. Maybe seeing past the corruption and the suffering to the beauty, and the transcendence is a form of alchemy when you're talking about a human. But for people who haven't read it, maybe I should summarize.
Yeah, please do.
A little bit of what this dark subject matter is. Just very quickly, it's about an old man known as the prophet who lives off grid, very much like Ralph. He's either plagued or blessed with visions, depending on how you see it, of the end. And he feels called that he needs to get them to the president. This is 2014, so to President Obama. We're in Obama's second term. The problem is he's sick. He's dying. He has lung cancer. But he's had a vision that a big fish is coming who will take these visions to the White House for him. One day he's scrounging for materials in the local junkyard and happens to see a sketchy car pull up to an abandoned gas station. And in the back seat of this car is a young adolescent girl with zip ties on her wrists. And he, in a kind of visionary moment, realizes two things: that she's being sexually trafficked and that she is the big fish that he's been waiting for. So what follows then is this kind of dramatic rescue scene. He plots out how he's going to kidnapped really, to call a spade, but to rescue her from her traffickers, bring her to his cabin, not for any nefarious purpose, but to take care of her, really, and more than he knows, to come to love her as kind of a granddaughter figure. They develop a sweet grandfather-granddaughter relationship so that he can send her, he thinks, to send her to Washington, D.C. to take these visions. And, of course, Michael, as she's known, that's her name, ends up having a whole different reason for going to D.C., but I don't know if I want to make a spoiler on that or not, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's a good place to stop.
Yeah.
He was, I love that the prophet, well, let's, to return to Flannery O'Connor. Yeah. Now, I can't remember if this was O'Connor talking about her own figures or if she was talking about, or someone was talking about her, but they said these prophets tended to speak, like Old Testament prophets, directly to God and not so much to the people around them.
Right.
And that seems like what your prophet is up to early on.
Right.
I was seeing him as just one of somebody cast in that mold. And then he's so tender.
Right.
I've never seen any of Flannery O'Connor's prophets be tender.
Right.
The way he's tender.
Right. That is a point of departure, I think. And I didn't expect that. That surprised me, the tenderness. I mean, really, I was writing to find out what the relationship was going to be between this prophet figure and this girl. I mean, the girl came to me as just a kind of image of this girl in the back seat. And I had already been writing into the prophet's character. And when this girl appeared, I didn't actually know how the two of them would be related. And I really wrote this novel as an act of discovery to find out how these two things were related. And I didn't know he was going to rescue her. I just didn't know. But once he did rescue her, I was just writing like, oh my gosh, what's he going to do when he gets her there?
Yeah.
And, helping her through the withdrawal and all of that was all just as I was exploring and discovering.
Yeah.
But the part of the story I haven't talked about is that the prophet does have a son, a real son from his from his marriage. His wife has passed away. His name's Zeke. And as you can imagine, growing up with a father, kind of a religious zealot like this, he has rejected his father, rejected all of the teachings, and has actually moved to Nashville to become a Johnny Cash performer. So, as one does.
Yeah.
So I think that what I started to discover when I put these two together was that the prophet was desperate for a second chance because he'd failed with his son. And I don't know that he knew or recognized that Michael was a chance to love someone exactly who they are and where they were, no matter, what rules they were following or what they believed about the religious system, that he just wanted to take her for who she was and wanted her to continue to care for him as well. But I think the reader sees that for the prophet, there's this tie to his son and to the loss of his son.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very much about found family in that way, I think. Yeah.
Can you say more about the idea of writing as discovery? Is that typical for the way you approach fiction writing?
Yes, and I wish it wasn't. It would be so much easier if I already knew exactly what was going to happen and then I could execute it. When I write nonfiction, I find that it works that way. You're given an assignment or a topic and you kind of know, all right, I have to say this thing in this many words. With a short story, it's a little bit more defined in the sense that, you can't get much more than 12,000, 15,000 words or someone's not going to publish it because it's no longer you get into novella territory. The novel's anarchy.
Yeah.
It's just there's no structure given to you. There's no form. There's no. It's just discovery. It's sort of like someone hands you a hacksaw and maybe a couple nails and a hammer, says build a house, and then you just you take your little things and you start listening. Okay, what does this sound like as I build? Tap, 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 tap. Okay, well that sounds like this, and it really for me it's sound based. So I'll write a sentence and listen, and the cadence and the pulse will tell me like, okay, this is sounding like this. I do believe there's like a pulse or a cadence or a kind of a beat underneath, that the music that's beneath the language is what's bubbling up through the surface and driving the narrative. I'm also,
don't know what that means.
I'm a classical pianist.
Okay.
My mother's a classical pianist, a concert pianist, actually. So music, that's why I love poetry. Is I think the poetic line and poetic form, but also the sound of the words really does direct what actually happens on the page. And then, of course, you have this mess when you're done, and then you edit. And
Can you say anything less mystical about how you get from the sound to the narrative?
The sound to the narrative. How do I want to say it? So Amy Hempel talks about it this way. She was my thesis advisor. And she says this quote where she says, if I'm listening to this da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da, it's pre-linguistic. And she'll be hearing it and listening to it, but she knows there's something attached there. And eventually that will become a sentence. Tell me things that I won't mind forgetting, which is what her dying friend says to her in the hospital. To keep her occupied. Tell me things I won't mind forgetting. So I have this whole lecture I do about writers who speak about writing this way, about the sound of the story coming first. Faulkner talks about it that way. Faulkner says the thunder and the music of the prose is in the silence of the white space. He talks a lot about how he incorporates white space as a form of the sound. But yeah, I don't know how to make it sound not mystical, other than what it looks like is writing a really bad sentence usually, and then rewriting that sentence and listening and think, okay, that's sounding good. It has a sonic quality, and then letting that quality begin to drive and having a vague idea of, what this story, okay, this is about a prophet.
Yeah.
This is about a sex trafficking victim. I'm in Florida. I want to get to Oregon eventually.
Yeah.
That's about as much as I know. And now let's listen as we drive and see where we go. And then there does come a time in the editing process, I think, where you have to nail down, okay, what does it all mean? And what have I got here? What is this? But it's improvisation to start. Does the word improvisation help a little bit?
Yes. I guess where I'm having trouble, improvisation does help. I understand the idea of the sounds and the rhythms. It's the narrative. It's the leap from the sound of the sentences to the narrative itself.
To the plot.
And but the example you gave of now I'm going to get it wrong, but tell me things that I won't mind forgetting. I certainly hear how we can get from the rhythms to the sentence, and then once I have that sentence,
Right.
now I want to know what that means.
Right.
So I guess that I'm following that much.
And how do we get from tell me things I won't mind forgetting to a story about a woman? No, but back to the Amy Hempel. Like, how do you get from tell me things I won't mind forgetting to a story about a friend who's dying, and ultimately the narrator abandons her friend as she's dying. It came out of an assignment that actually Gordon Lish gave to the students to write about the thing they're most ashamed of, something they would never tell anybody else about. And that was the prompt.
Yikes.
And that's what came out. And it's one of its stories called, if you don't know it, In the Cemetery Where Al Jolson is Buried. It's one of the most beautiful stories I've ever read. But I think, right, so she had this idea, I'm going to write about my friend who's dying. And then somehow started to listen and get sentences from that. And I think propulsively, once you start feeling that beat. So there was a musical cadence with the prophet's voice that came partly from just talking to him and listening to how he speaks, his vernacular.
You're not talking about Ralph. You're talking about
I'm talking about the fictional prophet.
Yeah.
Listening to Ralph gave me a music for my fictional prophet's way of speaking, I think, that is similar to Ralph's, but it's its own thing. But you know how that came out of hearing and listening is just trial and error over and over.
Yeah.
You know, butting your head against each sentence and making it better and better. Yeah. But then I think where the narrative comes from is you see what comes from that and you look at it and then you hone. Like, oh, I see. He has a son and his son has rejected him. And now I have 500 lines of dialogue I don't need. Yeah. Because now I know from having written those 500 lines that there's tension here. Yeah. And so then I can craft and hone so that the narrative comes up through.
Yeah.
But it started with sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it does sound a lot. It reminds me of the way George Saunders talks about.
Yes, I love.
Starting with he says you don't need an idea, you just need a sentence.
Right.
Yeah. And then you adjust that sentence, and you think what sentence might come after that, and then you adjust that sentence. And
he talks about how kindness and love undergirds that process of, so the one I'm thinking of, and tell me if this is the one you're thinking of, is where he starts with the sentence, Bob was an asshole.
Yes.
Do you know what we're talking about? He's like, well, that's not very descriptive. Like, Bob was an asshole because his wife just died. And he's grieving something else. And there's suddenly now we have a character. We don't just have this type. There's a really great 7-minute video. I think The Atlantic put it out of George Saunders talking about how this works. But that in being generous toward your characters and your revision process and always taking that road of how can I be the most generous, and that you will always kind of come upon a better sentence and a better craft and a better book.
Yeah. I love that idea that generosity leads to better work. Mm-hmm. And I'd forgotten about that from George Saunders.
Yeah.
So thanks for that reminder.
Yeah. He's a master.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned the prophet. You've mentioned Michael.
Yes.
A little bit about Zeke. But we got to talk about this devil. The two-step devil, who's dressed as a cowboy or performing cowboy costume. Bolo tie and some boots. And what possessed you?
Why? I don't know. That's what an interesting question is. Why does a character look the way they look? That is a really good question because so I could say, let's say for the prophet, he looks a certain way. Well, because I'm kind of basing him on this man that I know. But the devil, how does the devil look? And we've got this amazing history of devil literature that behind us. And why a cowboy hat wearing, bolo tie, cowboy boot? I mean, part of it might be, I wonder if there's something like Jungian archetypal, the outlaw. Is often cast as a cowboy. I mean, maybe he emerged in my imagination as one of these archetypal, rebels. Maybe it's because I'm from Tucson, Arizona originally. Okay, yeah. And we would have this thing growing up called rodeo vacation, where we'd get a week off of school and we'd get to go to the Tucson rodeo. This is in the 70s and 80s. It's a real thing. Instead of spring break, we had rodeo.
So it wasn't spring break and rodeo?
No, it was rodeo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because in New Orleans, they get spring break and Mardi Gras.
Yeah. No, this is just, it's rodeo. So we would go, and these cowboys, they seemed, arrogant, and like they were like giving a middle finger to the rest of the world who was like, they were out there roping cattle and riding bulls for a living. And so maybe that image was in my childhood imagination and somehow I associated it with the devil, but it's not typical. I used to be obsessed with this painting in my mother's art book by Michael Packer, St. Wolfgang and the Devil. And the devil's like what you would think. It's this lizard guy with, he's green, he's emaciated, he has cloven hoofs, horns, eyes in his bottom, and a mouth in his bottom with a little tooth. And I was obsessed. I would get up to scare myself. When you're a kid and you want to get up in the night and go in the hallway and get the book out and be like, I just wanted to make sure I knew what he looked like in case, because I was raised evangelical. What if he came after me? How would I know? He was an angel of light. And then I would look at that picture and know he's not an angel of light. So I did also want to care. I think I wanted something that was like, okay, we kind of know what a cowboy looks like, but he is a little faceless too. He doesn't have a face. Yeah.
Yeah.
So long answer for I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, this devil. I'm trying to think where to go next with this conversation. It's, I guess, you end up giving this devil freedom to tell his own story, such as it is.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long. There's a play inserted into this thing. Now I don't remember how long is this play.
It's a lot shorter than I wanted it to be because it was a risk for me to put this in here.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to impose on the reader's patience too much by expecting them to make this huge formal leap. So for those of you who haven't read it, the novel is structured in three major parts or three major movements. I had conceived of it originally as a sonata with so there's the prophet's section, and it's told in his third-person voice, and it covers the course of his lifetime, and that section is called prophecy. Then there's Song of Songs, which is Michael's section, and that is in her first-person voice, and it's all in one day, the day she leaves the prophet's cabin. And then there's the play, and that is the devil's section. So there's a triumvirate, there's a triptych. That section is called Gospel, and in that section, the devil, two-step, takes over the narrative and revisions the gospel in 7 acts. 7 scenes. It's a 1-act play, so 7 scenes, and it's the gospel according to two-step. So yes, if Milton wrote to justify the ways of God to man, this is Satan justifying the ways of the devil to humans, kind of saying, I've been maligned, I've been misunderstood, I am actually the good actor in the cosmic story. Yeah. My brother is a side character, his brother is Jesus in his telling. So it's pretty radical departure from anything orthodox, from any kind of Satan that you might encounter in any other. I think Milton's Satan is, for all of his glory and heroic, tragic heroism, is an orthodox narrator. He's telling the truth about God and Jesus and the story of as much as we know the truth of what happened before the fall. Yeah, right. I mean, Milton was we all assume like what Milton wrote was like, yes, of course there was a battle and he was cast out, but.
But he's also saying things like, I'm not sure God made me. I might have just sprouted up like a vegetable for all I know. Yeah, he does say some things like that.
He does push on it. And we would expect that. But yes, this devil is heretical. I mean, this devil is very much saying, like, Jesus in his telling was only wanting to come as a human to see what it was like. To, like, be incarnate, to see, like, I want to see to feel. I want to have these desires. I want to have these passions. And God is like, God is called creator. It's like, it's not going to go well for you. And he's like, well, then I'll just come back here and we'll carry on. Yeah. And then when Jesus comes to earth, like, I hate this. This is terrible. Like, he weeps when Lazarus comes, when he sees Lazarus's tomb, because he's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to die. I don't want to go through that. So there's all these, inversions of what Christ actually, and what the incarnation actually meant.
Yeah.
So, and I think inversion is the key for his narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty saucy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it originally started as a diatribe, a 40-page diatribe, and my editor wouldn't go for it. So I had to find a form in which it worked. I tried it in many ways.
It's down to less than 20 pages, right?
I think it's like 14 pages. Yeah.
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 Well, I know that you, an important precedent for two-step is Dostoevsky's Devil, Ivan's Devil.
Yes.
In Brothers Karamazov.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, most people think of the Grand Inquisitor chapter when you talk about devils and the Brothers Karamazov, but for me, the Ivan's Nightmare chapter, does everybody remember that chapter? I'll summarize what happens. This kind of Russian gentleman appears in the room with Ivan, who's sitting on the couch, and he looks very respectably dressed, but don't look too closely. His clothing's slightly out of style. He has every appearance of gentility on straightened means. I love that line. And he begins to say things like, I have been, much maligned. I actually love humans. I wish I could be one of them. Mm-hmm. I wish I could be incarnate as a 250-pound merchant's wife. I would go to church and light a candle. And kind of goes on to make the argument that I'm actually just the necessary minus. I think that's like a really important way that he characterizes himself, that God couldn't be truly good without God's opposite. And so I'm just doing what I've been bid to kind of be this adversary on behalf of God. And that, without me, what does he say? Without me, existence would be like one long, boring church service, holy but tedious. So that was really influential, because I do think that in the Old Testament, I'm not a scholar in any way. I haven't even taken a course in theology, but I did do a lot of reading. And the Hasatan in Hebrew is a title. It's not a name. Mm-hmm. It's the opposer or the adversary. So it's a role, not a name. And it's somehow in the New Testament becomes morphed into the name Satan. But so he's kind of going back to that. Like, look, I am only doing the bidding of God. Yeah. And I was taught that as a kid, that like Satan couldn't do anything without God's permission. Witness Job, where the opposer enters the court and says, permission, do I have permission to tempt this upright man? So just playing with all of that. Yeah.
Well, and playing it pretty straight, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you let the devil have his say.
That's right.
And then don't say, no, dear reader.
Yes.
Here's
what I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, my mom, when she read it, was like, this is heresy. This is horrible. Like, why does Jesus come out of the tomb and like kiss Satan and then ascend and all of these things? And I'm like, Mom, the devil's putting the play on. This is the devil's play. It would be actually unorthodox and heretical if the devil just straight up told the truth. Like, he needs to lie and put on like a big performance of lies if it's going to be an orthodox.
Yeah, but you didn't have the platforming.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, is that your? I can imagine that being your mother's position, or not. I'm not picking on your mother. I don't know her, but you did make the choice to let the devil tell it the devil's way.
Yes. Yeah. I think for whatever reason, when you call a book Two-Step Devil, you kind of have to let that character speak. Yeah. And the really nice thing about having eventually come to the form of the play was that I'd written it in so many other forms that by the time I landed on that structure,
the play structure,
I already knew all the things he wanted to say. And then it was really fun to just plug it into scenes. Yeah. And also, once I landed on that form, I realized that the play image was seated throughout the novel, and I hadn't even noticed. But when the devil shows up, he's on a stage, doing the little jig on the top of the skyscraper. Oh, yeah. When the prophet imagines defeating Satan, he imagines carving a giant X up on a stage, like a TV preacher he'd seen carving an X. When Michael is being instructed by the sister wife on how to get through the trafficking, she says, you have to come out of your body and watch yourself as if you're on a stage. Yes. So it was already there.
And so you didn't retrofit all that?
No,
really?
No. I just think your subconscious is much smarter than your conscious.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think writers, if they know too much, they get in their own way. Certainly I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned you tried this in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
You mentioned a diatribe, literally just a speech?
Yeah, it was like 45, 50 pages of a rant.
It's like Ayn Rand or something.
Yeah, it just went on and on and on. There was a whole thing about evolution, and it was much more, it was tedious.
Okay.
It was tedious. And it was disconnected from the narrative of the prophet and the girl. So that was the trick, is finding out how I could keep those two things connected. And so I needed to put the prophet and the devil in a room together. Oh, and the other thing I'll say is he's dying. These are his dying moments when this play happens. And there is something theatrical about those final moments. I don't know if you've seen Angels in America or like all that jazz, but there's often this trope of, the Ars Moriendi, the Latin instruction on dying, is like a play in which the dying person's in the bed, and they would perform this, and there would be the demons coming and saying one thing, and then the angels coming and saying the other thing, and in the ears of the person. So I think I was just thinking, well, in a dying consciousness, and in a dying, as this is happening, I think things might get a little theatrical. So it just felt right to do it that way. Yeah.
And were there more formats you experimented with?
Yeah, there was the rant. Editors hated it, threw it out. And then I tried a Q&A session where it was a Q&A session between creator and two-step. Okay. And that was just talking heads. It was disembodied. It was not connected to characters. I threw that out. I knew pretty quickly. Then I tried it as a screenplay.
Okay.
And that's because when the prophet's visions come, they drop down on a movie screen, a 5x5 movie screen. And so I thought, well, movies, that makes sense. But then I read screenplays. And if you've ever read a screenplay, there's very little stage direction. Directors and actors want that left for them to fill in. And it's Courier font. I don't want that in my book. So I went to Yaddo, which is a place where you can go with a residency. And
where Flannery O'Connor also went.
Yes, where Flannery O'Connor did go. And met some interesting people. She met the poet, Robert Lowell there. Yeah. Do you know Carlene Bauer's work,
No.
Francis and Bernard?
Yeah.
It's a fiction. You don't know that book? No. It's beautiful. It came out in 2013. Okay. And it's a fictional rendering of the relationship between Robert Lowell and Flannery O'Connor.
Really?
You need to read that book.
Okay.
It's really beautiful. Yeah. Carlene's a friend, but no, has anyone read Francis and Bernard? Oh, everyone, write it down. It's beautiful. I'm taking us off track.
Yeah. I was about to get us even farther off track. So let's.
So I went to Yaddo and was really discouraged because I already had copy edits on the rest of the novel and was like inputting copy edits, but still hadn't figured out the form of the gospel section. And providentially, I went to the library and just chose a spot to lie on the floor. And I thought I would just lie there and cry. But then I looked to my side and there was an entire shelf of one-act plays by this Eric Lane. He collates plays. And I just started reading one-act plays and just very immediately realized this is it. This is doable. It's the right length. Yeah. I can copy this from, never written a play before, but I just, when you've read 30 of them, you can kind of mimic it. So I did. And that was it. Yeah.
Sorry, my little thing here turned itself off. Okay. All right. Before we run out of time, I did want to ask you about the Paris Review interview you did. And you said that one of your mentors, David Gates, said, Jamie, you can let your characters do things on the page that you would never do. Let them fail. Let them suffer. And then you you paraphrase Flaubert, keep a clean and orderly life so you can be violent and messy on the page. Glad to hear that you have a orderly life.
It's like the physician saying, now don't smoke, don't drink.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Physician, heal thyself.
Yeah. But that seems to have made an impression on you. The idea, let your characters do things that you would never do. Again, it might get you in trouble with your mother.
Yes. Oh, yes. Although she's been really wonderful as time has gone on to understand kind of what I'm doing. So, yes, I don't remember what book that interview was in the context of.
I think it was the Fire Sermon.
Was it Fire Sermon? Yeah. So my last two books were about an affair. The first one was about an emotional, distance affair, and the second was about an actual physical affair, kind of in the center of a very long-term committed marriage. And it's funny because the writers in my life, even if they don't know me personally, like my friend Tom Bissell wrote or called and said, I can't imagine, you have such a good marriage, because if you're going to go that far into the well, you've got to have a strong partner holding the rope. And so for me, it was like, I've only ever been, my husband was my first boyfriend. We met when I was 17. We've been married for 35 years. He's the only man. And so for me, it's like an act of exploration and an area of, you write to find out what you maybe take paths you never took, or write to find out what you don't know, or to explore. But there was a lot of pushback, I think, especially with the first book, with assumptions of, as, you're a woman, and of course you must be writing your diaries, and how could you possibly have thoughts like this, or whatever. So that was interesting. So I'm wondering if that's the interview in which I was saying, no, there's a tremendous energy in resisting temptation. Yeah. And I think if you expend all of that energy in giving into it, it where's the energy for your art? Yeah. So I think that probably what I meant about keep an orderly life so you can be messy on the page. So I feel myself, if I was messy in my life, I might not be able to have anything left to give to the page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sure. And then you, in the same interview, you talk about the idea that wrestling is the mark of a viable religious practice. And I'd love to hear you, if you're willing, to talk about how that wrestling shapes your storytelling.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's personal, spiritual wrestling, and then there's aesthetic, artistic wrestling, and they're similar and related, or adjacent things, but maybe not quite the same thing. So speaking personally, as far as wrestling, I thought growing up, so I grew up in the Church of Christ, the mainline Church of Christ, which is the what is it, Baptist with no instruments is what we always said, no dancing, no drinking. But I always just thought, if you just have the beliefs in the right way and orderly, and you do all of these right things, then you've arrived. Your faith is there, it's solid. The Church of Christ taught that, your baptism saves you. And also, I was told you could lose your salvation. So, saved by grace, sanctified by works, kind of, or saved by works, sanctified by works. So it was just this kind of, I took it for granted that this was the way, this was what everybody believed. There was a way of thinking that was this is the one church, that there was no denominations, denominationalism was a sin. So really only the Church of Christ was on the right path. And these are things I actually grew up believing. And then, you go to college and you start meeting people and you start reading more. And it just became untenable for me to continue on thinking this. So we started attending a Reformed church when we were in graduate. My husband and I got married, as I said, quite young. Started attending a Reformed church and really came into understanding more about Reformed theology. And what I loved about Reformed theology was it gave me I felt like I had puzzle pieces, but Reformed theology was the setting. And I was like, oh, okay, worldview and meta-narrative and, eternal security and all of these things. But I was always but that Ellen the Tulip or whatever, there were still struggles. So it was just, it was trading one kind of wrestling for another kind of wrestling with Calvinism. And then lately, in the past, I'd say 5 years, the wrestling has become more with missing like embodied forms of worship. So sacramental theology is kind of now where I've come to rest. And sacramental theology. So we go to a church in the Anglican Episcopal tradition, and I link those two together because there's a big mess with the two sides. So I just say both. But the sacramental theology has made a lot of sense for me of what I'm doing as a fiction writer, of seeing objects and material and all of that as sanctified. And but I'm sure I'll start wrestling with sacramental theology at some point. I'll probably become like Eastern Orthodox next, and then maybe Catholic. Who knows? But I think that's like for me, I'm never settled. I'm always the only things I love, not the only things, but right now, the things I love to read are poetry and theology. I will read fiction because it's part of my job, but mostly what's inspiring me is reading theology. I'm reading Bonhoeffer right now. Actually, I have him with me. The Cost of Discipleship. It's like, something hit me over the head in there this morning. But yeah, where's I going with that? I don't think arrival or settling or deciding on like this theology or this way of acting is ever what faith looks like. It has to look like questioning. It has to.
Yeah. I think in writing, when you start with the answer rather than starting with questions,
it's going to be a bad book. It's going to be a bad book. Yeah, I agree.
It's even a bad opinion piece, right? When you, I mean, it's hard to start an opinion piece without knowing your opinion, except that you also need to be a little open that maybe your opinion can change over the course of the writing the thing.
And listening to people's stories, not listening to politics and the way we've bifurcated and this, these ideas about where we stand on issues. When you actually sit with a human being who is suffering in some way or is struggling in some way or is just, on the opposite side of the table from you, and you get to know them as a person, a lot of times you realize like it's yes and, it's not either or.
And those abstractions don't seem to, the categories don't seem to, I don't think of myself as fitting into any categories really. And nobody thinks of themselves as fitting in categories or think of others as fitting in categories.
Exactly. That's one thing with getting to know Ralph is that a lot of his behavior, like people would want to know, well, is he schizophrenic or is he this? And I think it took me 10 years to write this book because I needed to get past that need to, is it illness? Is it madness? Is it genius? Is it vision? Like, what is it? And people want to know, which one is he? And I had to stay with him long enough so that those questions stop mattering. He is Ralph. He is who he is. It doesn't matter, what labels we put on him.
Yeah. Well, your prophet is so human.
Yeah.
That's how, essentially, you talk about the need for embodied religion, religious practices, because fiction embodies and it explodes those abstractions.
Right.
And, abstractions actually maybe are a place to start, but it's only a place to start. And it's better not in there or you're in trouble.
To bring us back to St. Flannery, belief is the light by which you see, but it is not what you see. And it is not, what is the second part she says? It is not
It can't do the seeing for you.
It can't do the seeing for you.
Yeah.
That we have to start with the material. And that material sometimes is going to be messy and ugly and quote unquote sinful. But how do you sing the song of the cure when you haven't sung the song of the illness?
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Let me wrap up with my typical last question. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
How much time do you have? I always have a running list in the front of my book, but so I'll answer it from when I was a child, who made me want to be a writer. So when I was little, I read Madeleine L'Engle, all of Madeleine L'Engle, over and over and over again. But the Wrinkle in Time trilogy was, for whatever reason, I didn't know she was a Christian. I was just incredibly enchanted by these books, and then of course Tolkien and Lewis as a child growing up in a Christian home. And those sparked my imagination. I thought, well, I'm going to do what they do someday.
Yeah.
And then in college, who made me want to be a writer, I studied English. I got my master's degree in English, and then I went and started my doctorate in English as well. And it was Joyce and Woolf and Faulkner, all of these great sentence makers,
Yeah.
these long sentence makers, poetic sentence makers. But as I was saying lately, it's mostly a diet of poetry and theology. Merton, Wyman, the Confessions, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, James Baldwin, Annie Dillard. These are some prose people. Brian Doyle. Has anyone read Brian Doyle? Oh, gosh. We lost him way too young.
I had never read anything until it was the posthumous collection that I read.
Yeah. One Long River of Song.
One Long River of Song.
Oh, so good.
Incredible.
And then poets have always been, well, right now I'm reading Patrick Kavanagh. Do you know his poetry? Patrick Kavanagh, he wrote, Irish poet, obviously, he wrote this poem called Canal Bank Walk. Maybe I'll just read the end of it. I have the quote in here. So it's a sonnet, and in the octet, he's walking along and just kind of looking at the world, the mundane world. There's a canal, there's a couple sitting, kissing on a bench. And then at the volta, in the sestet comes, it says, "Oh, unworn world, enrapture me and capture me in a web of fabulous grass and eternal voices by a beach. Feed the gaping need of my senses. Give me ad lib to pray unself-consciously with overflowing speech. For this soul needs to be honored with a new dress woven from green and blue things and arguments that cannot be proven."
Wow. That's,
It's good.
Thank you.
And that speaks to me. That's my prayer right now. Because I feel a little jaded by the world.
Yeah.
I need the unworn world to enrapture me again. Yeah.
Well, Jamie Quatro, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been really great. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.